All right, well, we got our shop drawings back, but shocker, we got to revise and resubmit. So this is typical through pretty much every project, unless you're lucky and get it done in one shot. But in this one, we're going to go through the process of what we need to do now that we need to update these drawings with these red line markups. So let's get this done as fast as possible so we can get it back to the customer and hopefully get this thing into production. All right, so I went ahead and I opened up our new kitchen project. Now that we got our shop drawings back, let's take a look and see what kind of changes they want. Okay, starting off with our cover page, we can see they have a finish schedule now. So that's good. We know what colors we're using. Well, obviously, we'll have to update it with some field measurements. We know that. That'll be coming up in another video. Upper cabinet depth, and some other changes to the default cabinet sizes. Also looks like we need to make a couple revisions to the products. So we'll go into our local prompts and do those. And nothing else specifically called out here on our sections. I think that gives us enough to go back into our project and start making some of these changes. The first thing that we're going to do is go back into our specification group. Let's go there to our project spec groups. And now we can rename our specification group. However you want to rename this, I'm just going to put an underscore and PL2. But we still only need one spec group. The changes that we're going to make here don't require an additional spec group. So let's start off by going into the project wizard and making some changes to the default cabinet sizes. So the tall cabinet height, we need to change that. The new tall cabinet height is going to be 90. And setting this height here also sets the height above floor for the upper cabinets. Tall cabinet depth, we're good. The upper cabinets needed to change to 36 and upper cabinet depth to 15. Going back to our elevation, we can see those are all the changes that we can make in the project wizard. The next thing we'll do is go into our material file, make a change so we can have our uppers calling out the correct material, and then into the local prompts to make the rest of the changes. Let's close out of this, open that material file. I'm just going to right click and get in my groups here so we can see what we're working with. Those are all the upper parts. We're not going to be doing anything with the carcass, but for the finished faces and the open carcass parts, we need to make a change there. I'm just going to find that selected material, quickly get to the folder that it's in, find the two-sided, double click or right click on it, and copy that to the project level. Just going to copy it one time, double click, and get into the interface to start making some edits. Make a name change. It's going to be a EL2, two-sided material, and it will have grain. We can also change our thickness here. We want to make sure that the thickness matches the actual material that we have out in the shop or whatever we're using for production. And any other changes that we want to make in here with the comments. Now, because we've told this material that it has a grain, make sure that we have that grain direction selected. So this is running along the length of the panel. Phase 6 only flip setting. So this is when you get into the work order. If you have any phase 6, if you always want to be asked to flip it, you can always ask, always flip, or never flip. So just depending on how you have your production set up and how you handle phase 6 parts. I'm just going to leave it always ask for now. Hit OK. Now we're ready to reassign the material to those two groups. Now before we close out of here, I want to double check our render finish options in our project wizard. Forgot to do that. So upper rendering finish is going to change now. Because we've changed the material, I want now our rendering finish to read a PL2. And this will also be the finish label on our 2D elevation drawing. Okay, now let's go back into model space and redraw some of these products. Before we do that, I want to make sure that my current layer is set to 0. That's because in a previous video, we had our finished end text on layer 0. So as we redraw these plan views, I don't want that text layer to change. Now, because we only made changes to the upper and tall cabinet, I'm not going to redraw everything here. I'm going to do a window and select the upper cabinets. Remember, the window allows you to highlight those item numbers. And for the tall, if you have something in there that you don't want, just hold down Shift and left click to unselect that. Get the other uppers on elevation B, and yeah, I think that's it. So we'll redraw those. I want to redraw the plan view because we want to update our shop drawings along with this, but I'm not going to redraw the cross sections for right now. We'll go and do those individually. Now, after that's done, we want to make sure that we don't need to make any changes to make sure these cabinets are going to work as they go out into production. So it's a little hard to see in this view, so let's take a look at our plan view over here in 2D. So I see a conflict in the corner, and that's because of our upper cabinet depth changing to 15. So why don't we go into that upper cabinet next to the window and take off 2 inches in the width. Because I pulled a dimension, my layer went back to 2D dim. So I'll have to redraw that again. It's better, okay. And then we have that space we need for our blind panel. So obviously the elevations haven't updated yet. We'll have to redraw our 2D walls. Under the Draw tab and 2D Drawings, we'll redraw our 2D walls. And now that our 2D wall elevations have been redrawn, you can see that the height of the uppers have changed. We also have the layer on that 2D object changed because of our rendering finish being a finish 2. There's our PL2 finish label option. So you can see some of the different changes now updated in our 2D elevation drawings. Over to elevation B, same thing there. Now, one thing I see on elevation A that we have to take a look at is this filler. For some reason the height of that didn't update, so we'll dig a little bit deeper and see what happened there. But before we do that, let's draw this new hatched return so we can delete that one with an AutoCAD delete. Now our draw hatched return, and just update that with our new height above floor, and new depth. Remember, this is the side of the cabinet we want to see, so different from our cross sections. We want to see the right-hand side of that cabinet, and there's our new upper. Fix that dimension along with these here. And before we dig into that filler, I noticed I also didn't add the dimensions for our base cabinet height and the space in between. So get that added. And I'll use a dim continue command and finish that off. So I like to stay on one elevation before we move on to elevation B with anything. So let's take a look at this filler and see why that didn't update. And then we'll come back and take a look at our red line drawings, see what else we need to change on this elevation. So just going into the local prompts to see if we can find anything in here. Check some of these boxes, take a look at some of the other tabs, but we're not going to find what we're looking for. So let's go to the subassembly, since that Scribe filler is a subassembly, and that's the culprit right there. So because this is hard valued, it obviously didn't update with the change we made in the project wizard. Now, this was something I did in the previous video when we were getting this ready to send off to our customer for submittal. Not the best way to do it to add that static value. You can see what happens. So instead, we're going to have to overwrite that with a formula. Now we can take a look at our finished faces and see if we can cheat a little bit, grab the formula from here, but that's got a lot going on. So why don't we do this the other way? And that's by going into a product that also has a Scribe filler and just grabbing that formula from there. The height is formula driven. We're just going to copy that and go back into our other product. And now we have that formula. Once we hit OK, that'll apply the formula and update it to the height from our project wizard. But because we have that crown molding, I do want to have that 1/8 gap. So the recommended way to do this is to just add to the end of a formula. Because we want 1/8 inch, we could do it that way. Or even better, if we want to change our upper top gap from our global variables, we can add this name here. And it doesn't matter whether they're lowercase right now, as long as you have the spelling and those underscores correct, it updates with the way that it was originally created as a defined name. All right, so now we have the correct height with the upper top gap. Let's hit OK and let that filler redraw. And while we're looking at this view here, you can see how we have that dimension. So it does have a background mask on it, but because of the draw order, I'll show you how we can correct that. Type in DR in the command line for draw order, select the dimension, hit enter or right click, and now you have these options down here. We're going to bring that object to the front. So you can just type in F or select it, and now we've brought it in front of that 2D wall. Now let's go back to our red line drawings and see what else we have to update for elevation A. So we got the uppers, that's good. Now just the 3 drawer banks. Those drawer fronts need to be equal height. To do this, we're going to go into the prompts and right click and get into our calculators. Because they all need to be equal, just make sure all those 3 boxes are checked, hit calculate, and now we got 3 equal drawer front heights. Let's do this to the remaining 2 products. Same way, back into the prompts and into the calculators. So I think that's good for elevation A. Why don't we move on to elevation B? But I think we'll save that for our next video. So we still got a little bit more work that we need to do before we're ready to send these back to our customer. But I think we're at a good stopping point. So why don't we leave it here, and then we'll continue with part 2 of the revise and resubmittal process. So I'll see you in our next video.